Happy New Year, everybody. For today, we are diving into a year in review. We are starting with the quarterbacks and checking out how they performed versus that of their projections. Let's get ready.
All right. Welcome to the show. This is the Frankly Fantasy Football Podcast. We are your hosts, Frankie and Johnny. Happy New Year, brother. Welcome to the end, man. We made it to the end, dude.
We're here. We made it through another season. How about that?
We certainly did. Did you get any hardware this year, Frank?
John, I'm going to have to kiss goodbye to my sweet trophies. I've had 3 years in a row I've had a trophy. And this year I got second. You know, I said it ran through me and I got ran over. So, hey, it happens, man. It
happens to the best of us. Yeah, shout out to all of you Super Bowl winners. Congratulations to all of you. I hope you're wearing your rings. Get those trophies up on your mantle above your fireplace. Put them right in the kitchen. Piss your wives off or your husbands off. If you're a wife and you've got a trophy and your husband doesn't, please put that right in the middle of the kitchen table every single day and let him know who's boss, okay? I love it. All right, welcome to the show, guys. We're going to pop off some videos for you here at the end of the season. We're going to do a year in review. And what we're looking at, we're going to do each position. We're going to go quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, and receivers. And we're going to talk about top 24 quarterbacks. We're going to do top 30 running backs and receivers. And I think top 12 at least of tight ends. So this video is going to be the year in review for quarterbacks. So we're going to talk about top 24 quarterbacks here in order, starting with number 1, and we're going to go all the way to 24 here. We're going to talk about where they ended up. We're going to talk about where they were projected and where they were drafted. And we're going to see if they were risers or fallers and see how things went here. Get a little color commentary on those. So let's get after it here, buddy. Let's go. All right. Top 24 quarterbacks. Let's start. These top 3 guys, I'm just going to throw these guys out here, Frank, so we can talk about them. All 3 are in the conversation for the MVP. All 3 of them had an absolutely incredible season. Let's start right off here. We've got number 1, Lamar Jackson, number 2, Josh Allen, and number 3, Joe Burrow, man. What unbelievable performances out of these guys this year. If you had them on your teams, I can almost guarantee you went deep in your playoffs this year with these guys. The point differential between the top 3 and the bottom 23, 22, 24, huge. All right, Frankie, so let's break it down. Let's look right at it here. Let's look at Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, number 1 quarterback on the season, 467 points in fantasy. He was projected to start the year at QB2 with 400 points. He far exceeded that. Also had 25.7 points per game. My God, what a foundation for your team. Talk to me about Lamar a little bit, man.
Guys, I mean, Lamar coming in, right, when he was projected to be QB2, it was really splitting hairs. I mean, John, between me and you, I mean, especially is between him, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, in my opinion. My God, if you ended up taking Lamar, you hit gold. And John, what was crazy is, again, we're talking about MVP season, especially between these 3. Well, here's Lamar. He has 3,955 yards passing. He had 852 yards rushing. He ended up passing the ball for 39 touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, and he only had 4 interceptions. John, what's crazy about Lamar is this is his most accurate season ever. And he's on par from an NFL history standpoint as one of the most accurate passers ever this year. And so for me, man, I mean, what a gold mine if you ended up hitting on Lamar and seeing that paired with Derek Henry. I know people were a little bit freaked out early on. My God, did it work out beautifully.
It absolutely did. I mean, he was a QB1 in every single game except for 1 game against Pittsburgh.
That's crazy.
I mean, he was absolutely beautiful for fantasy. I mean, is this a guy you could consider, depending on your scoring, obviously, but is this a guy you could consider taking number 1 overall and just knowing you've got a solid foundation of having a running back and a receiver like Lamar Jackson, or a quarterback and a running back?
Yeah, John, totally. Guys, this is something that really we need to be thinking about for 2025. Sure, we'll be talking about this more as we're getting ready for your drafts and things like that next year, but absolutely keep that in your back pocket. Guys, to have somebody who is rushing for 850 plus yards with 4 rushing touchdowns, that's already middle of the pack for top performing running backs. Then you layer on his passing ability, 3,900 yards. He's going to have over 4,000 yards, assuming he just does what he's supposed to do against the Cleveland Browns. Guys, this is incredible. So, John, I think that you can totally make an argument. We've had guys in our leagues that drafted Josh Allen at number 2. We've had guys that drafted Patrick Mahomes at number 7 overall. And so if you're now putting Lamar Jackson into this fold and looking at next year, guys, this is a slam dunk. And I don't see Derrick Henry slowing down anytime anyways when he's paired with Lamar, which gives Lamar some more breathing room. So for me, man, I think you could make that argument that, hey, we don't know what's going to happen from year to year. We looked at Christian McCaffrey this past year as 101, bad. We looked at Jonathan Taylor when he was the consensus number 1 overall pick, bad. Why not anchor your team if you're stuck between maybe Jamar Chase or you're worried about an injury-prone individual that you're looking to take top 3, top 4 next year? You can anchor on Lamar and be really happy.
You know, the other interesting thing with Lamar, too, is, he didn't have any top 10 receiving options. So you would think this guy had this many points. He clearly had an alpha. He clearly had somebody who was just dominating his target share. He did not.
No.
He spread the ball around, man. I mean, Zay Flowers, good year, but not what I was expecting. With the numbers, with Lamar making an MVP run like he has, you would think Zay Flowers would be a top 12 receiver. He absolutely was not. I think he was 20.
Yeah.
Mark Andrews, same thing. He did have a very good year, but the tight end landscape sucked anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, Mark Andrews was near the top 10, but Rashad Bateman, I mean, he just kind of came out of nowhere towards the end of the year. Lucky waiver wire pickup to help you win your leagues, but it's not a guy you could rely on all season long. So it's just really interesting to me, which makes me feel so good about him next year.
Totally.
Not having to worry about the health of a single receiver like a JJ or an AJ Brown or a Jamar Chase. So that's what makes Lamar really interesting to me for next year as well. All right, let's get to the number 2 guy here, Frankie. Real big toss-up of who was going to be the number 1 draft pick for quarterbacks. Josh Allen was the consensus 1. Ended up as the number 2 quarterback on the season. But again, amazing numbers out of a Superman here, man. So let's talk a little bit about this here. Josh Allen, 429 points. He was projected to be the QB1, ended the QB2, 24.1 points per game. Frankie, talk to me about Josh Allen.
Guys, Josh Allen, the stallion, just absolutely doing insane things. When we talk about not having a true receiver 1, John, we're going to be in the Bills camp talking about that as well. Sure, they traded for Amari Cooper. Boy, did he look like shit. So now you're looking at Khalil Shakur. Now they're trying to get Dalton Kincaid, who was banged up all season, trying to get him involved. Then you're trying to figure out, okay, James Cook, we can't rely solely on him. So now we got to get Ray Davis involved a little bit as well. And so for me, man, seeing what Josh Allen has also done with the pieces around him is nothing short of magical. And so for me, looking at what he did, he had over 3,700 passing yards, 28 passing touchdowns. He had 6 interceptions, so very, very effective and efficient. But here's the difference. Josh Allen had 12 rushing touchdowns. That's just crazy. That is just absurd. And so when we think about, okay, well, James Cook still did very well, right? We talked about Lamar with Derrick Henry still doing very well. In addition to those guys, when you look at what Josh Allen did, it was almost like Jalen Hurts last year when he was on the 1-yard line having 15 rushing touchdowns, and he was incredible. So for me, man, again, I just think when we're thinking for next year, right? This year's already gone. We see how well these dudes performed. When we're thinking about next year, John, I think Josh Allen is going to fall right to where we said. You can draft him in the first round again, and I think it's only going to get better if Amari stays there and they continue to develop the chemistry. If they get a couple like Khalil Shakur a little bit more time to develop and continue, doing well, and then Dalton Kincaid, if they get him actually healthy and rocking and rolling, dude, we could see maybe Lamar 2 or 3 and Josh Allen 100% the number 1. So guys, these 2 guys specifically and especially can absolutely be viewed as a top first round pick, in my opinion.
Very similar conversation like I just talked about with Lamar. Like you were saying, he did not have an alpha receiver that dominated all season long. It's not a Joe Burrow. Say T. Higgins isn't on the team next year. Joe Burrow loses Jamar Chase. It's going to be a very different Joe Burrow.
Definitely.
We didn't see that with Josh Allen. We didn't see that with Lamar Jackson. So that shows me these guys are going to be the creme de la creme for years to come because of that. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, Josh Allen, you talk about his rushing touchdowns, and you're going to talk about people next year. Oh, he won't have as many next year, or that he vultures them from James Cook. James Cook led all running backs in touchdowns this year, by the way. 17 touchdowns for James Cook.
Really? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, I heard that
Really?
stat, and then while you were talking, I just had to double check it and see. But yeah, he had 15 rushing touchdowns and two receiving touchdowns. So to have 15 rushing touchdowns with Josh Allen had 12? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, he had 12 rushing touchdowns. Josh Allen did.
So, there's enough to eat there, man, So I don't want to hear this shit next year. Make sure you check me if I say it. I'm going to go back and roll the tape here. But don't be afraid of James Cook as well, just because Josh Allen scores touchdowns. Yep. You didn't take away Derek Henry's touchdowns because Lamar scores either. They all ate this year. And there's no reason to believe that they're not going to do it again. All right, let's go to number 3 here. Number 3, we've got Joe Cool Burrow. 415 fantasy points. Projection at the start of the year was going to be QB7. He ended up at the QB3. This guy just went apeshit this year. 23 points per game. Frankie, what's going on with Joe Burrow this year?
John, Joe Cool is a guy that he's, in my opinion, man, he's one of the most underappreciated people in the NFL. I think he kind of gets glossed over. I think it's because he's been banged up. I think he's had some issues, get it with sacks and things like that, keeping him off the ground because the offensive line is just terrible for the most part. But my Lord, John, I've said it 2 episodes ago. I think if Joe Burrow had a better defense, I think, and I know that sounds crazy, I think Joe Burrow would be MVP. And here's why. He's throwing for already, we still have 1 week left, John. He has 4,641 passing yards, 4,641 passing yards, significantly more than that of Lamar and Josh Allen. He actually almost has 1,000 more yards than Josh Allen alone from the passing perspective. In addition, he's thrown for 42 touchdowns. 42! Like nobody else has thrown for 40s yet. He is the guy. It's incredible, man. And then he had 2 rushing touchdowns, and yeah, he's thrown for 8 picks. Sure, but that's because he has to throw the ball way more. When we talk about passing attempts, John, this is a huge call out here. Lamar Jackson, 442. Josh Allen, 483. Joe Burrow, 606 passing attempts. Guys, when you're thinking about fantasy football, and you know that this team is down, and that when we talk about game scripts, this is what we're talking about. When a guy has a positive game script, meaning they're down more often than not, they have to throw the ball way more to keep up with these teams. So what I'm getting at is, guys, next year, Ja'Marr Chase might be the consensus number 1 overall pick, right? Between him, maybe Saquon Barkley, right? Something along those lines. Shit, you could end up looking at Lamar. You could end up looking at Josh Allen, things like that. But for me, man, I think that Joe Burrow is gold. If you can get a Joe Burrow, man, and maybe that 2nd or 3rd round, if he ends up dropping, right? And you could pair him with the stack of Ja'Marr Chase next year. Maybe you have the 101 and you snake all the way back down, John, and you're now taking Joe Burrow at, 212 or 301 or whatever it may be. That's fucking gold, guys. And so this is a guy, in my eyes, that has been slept on. And because of how bad his offensive line is and how the defense is, he's not really talked about as much. So for me, look at Joe Burrow next year. Don't fall for the QB7 projection. Don't fall for all that bullshit because we're seeing he's better than that anyways.
Best year Joe Burrow's ever had. Just looking at the past, 5 years on here, 109.8 QB rating. Most completions he's ever had, 423. Crazy. Most attempts at 606. His best completion percentage. Most yards at 4,600. Most touchdowns by far with 42. Just an absolutely insane season, man. Yeah. As far as the best pure passer in the league, it's Joe Burrow. It's Joe Burrow.
Close.
You're talking about he's in this same conversation, which was, what are we talking about here? 14 points lower than Josh Allen. 14 points in fantasy lower than Josh Allen. Josh Allen had 12 goddamn rushing touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Lamar Jackson had 8 goddamn rushing touchdowns. So these guys are hybrids. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Joe Burrow is more of a Peyton Manning type quarterback or a Tom Brady type quarterback. He's not running the ball. He may sneak a few in here and there. He is a pure passer, and his stats are goddamn ridiculous. So Absolutely love that, man. All right, now let's look at the next three here. Now we've got a little shakeups here. We got some highlights here on some of these guys. The 4, 5, and 6 at quarterbacks. Not guys that we expected in these positions, for sure. Number 4, Baker Mayfield. Number 5, Jared Goff. And number 6, Jayden Daniels. Love this tier right here. Scares me a little bit for next year. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the way these guys ended this year is fantastic. Number 4, Baker Mayfield. 394 points in fantasy. Projection to start of the year was going to be the QB 13. He ended up as the QB 4. Way overperformed. If you were in a super flex league or 2 QB league and you took Baker as your second, you were absolutely thrilled. 22.5 points per game. Talk about big.
John, Baker had one of the best years he could ever have dreamed of having. You mentioned the numbers, but let's dig into that a bit more. Guys, when we talk about him having 22.5 points a game, and we just talked about Joe Burrow having 23, think about that. Baker is right on par with Burrow. He's really, only about 25 points, 20 points back from Joe Burrow. So when we start digging in, okay, well, what did Baker do really, really well? It was his passing and consistency in the pass game. Johnny had 4,200 yards passing through 17 weeks. In addition to that, he had 310 yards rushing, 39 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and he had 15 interceptions. That's where he fell a little bit short. John, if he ended up, let's just say he halved those interceptions, he would actually be the QB 3. Think about that. If he halved those interceptions to put him right where Joe Burrow's were, he is having a better overall year than Joe Burrow had, which is absurd to even think from a fantasy perspective. And here's the other cool call out about Baker is he lost Chris Godwin. He lost Cade Otton. He lost some of these guys, right? The team started off with Rachaad White at the running back. Then they shift to Bucky Irving. And now they're trying to be a run-first team. But Baker's throwing the ball so well that now the entire offense is hot. John, you mentioned it, thinking for next year. Guys, Baker is a guy that makes me nervous, though. When we start thinking about, okay, well, how is he going to compare to this year? This could be a unicorn year for Baker. Let's just put it on the table. This could be a unicorn year. We don't know. We've seen him perform very well. John, we're Browns fans. We're ride and die Browns fans, as sad as that is, right? We saw how good he can be, but nothing was even close to this, like not even remotely close. So for me, be wary drafting him next year if you're thinking his expectation is a top 5 QB. I think he probably slips just a shade next year. Teams are going to have a little bit better game script on him. They're going to have a little bit more film. They're going to be able to understand the offense a little bit more, right? Things change from year to year so drastically, especially for a guy like Baker. So for me,
you'll assume that division should get better next year.
Way better.
It was an unfortunate just pile of dog shit in the NFC South this year. And assuming that gets better, he's going to have harder competition as well.
Great call. Look at the Saints. Look how bad the Saints were. Look at how bad the Carolina Panthers have been, right? And then you talk that now they're vying for the NFC South division with a rookie quarterback who's not playing well in Michael Penix Jr. So for me, I think that this division is only going to get better. So great call out there. So just be careful when looking at Baker Mayfield for 2025, guys. Level set your own expectations. But if you can get him around that QB 10 spot, shit, John, in a 2-quarterback league, there's a lot of value there.
Baker Mayfield finished. He was a top 10 quarterback. Top 10 quarterback in all games but 4.
That's incredible.
Top 10. Yeah. Incredible year, Bake. Gotta love it, man. I'm proud of you. All right, number 5, let's go to Jared Goff, quarterback for the Detroit Lions, man. 375 points on the year. He started the year with a projection at QB 14, ended at 5. 20.3 points a game. What's going on with Goff? Goffrey.
John, Goff has just totally taken Detroit by storm. That city loves him. He's bought into Dan Campbell, and my Lord, is it showing. John, Jared Goff, right? 4,398 yards. He's going to have a hell of a lot more than that after this week, right? He's going to have a hell of a lot more than that after this week, and he still finished top 5. In addition to that, well, what was his passing touchdowns? He still threw for 36 passing touchdowns and only 10 interceptions. When we talk about efficiency, when you talk about finding diamond in the rough, when you're thinking about your draft strategies, guys, there's 2 rooms of thought here. One is you go for one of those top guys knowing that you can anchor your team on them. praying for, you're right, not an injury to occur. Or you're going for a guy that's like a Baker or a Jared Goff, to where you're drafting your team and you're trying to hit on those receivers, running backs, tight end, etc., building that depth, and then taking a flyer on one of these quarterbacks and hoping they hit. Every single year there's a quarterback like this that hits. And this year, right, we talked about last year's Stafford, or 2 years ago it was Stafford. Last year, a few others came into play. This year it's Jared Goff and Baker. When you're thinking about 2025, guys, and what your draft strategies could be, think about what you want to do in terms of, are you anchoring that team on a quarterback, or you have something in your pocket like a Jared Goff?
Yeah, I mean, Jared Goff's one of those guys that, sure, he finishes at 5, but it doesn't feel like that all the time, you know? Like, he doesn't give you a lot of those boner weeks. He had, 2 of them in there. Week 11 against Jacksonville with 34 points. Week 15 against Buffalo with 41 points. But most of his, he's generally going to be in the teens. He was right around that 12 to 16 points almost every week, and peppering in a few, 25-point weeks in there. So Jared Goff, even though he ends up at the 5, you don't draft this guy as a ceiling guy.
Yeah.
You're not looking at him to win you a week. You're looking at him to give you a solid foundation. I think Baker's kind of the same way. You're not drafting this guy saying, oh my God, he's going to throw 5 touchdowns again. All right, he did that twice. Take it easy. It's a long, long season. But I think these are good floor guys for you to have a solid foundation to you, help you win your leagues. All right, let's keep going over to the next guy here. Let's go number 6 here in our trio. Rookie sensation. We got a rookie here, Frankie. Jayden Daniels, rookie quarterback for the Washington Commanders. 370 points, 5 points behind Jared Goff. Projected to be the QB6. Frankie, he was the QB6, depending on your scoring here. Averaging 22.5 points per game. Talk to me about Jayden.
Guys, we were all over Jayden. We had, everybody was coming at us on YouTube saying, maybe, I think you guys are too high on them, right? Hey, he finished exactly where he was supposed to, and we were high on him, and he has done the job. Guys, Jayden Daniels, he had 3,500 yards passing. He had 864 yards rushing. He had 25 passing touchdowns, 6 rushing touchdowns, and he had only 9 interceptions. Here's the stat, though, John, to me that's mind-blowing. His passing attempts. Guys, this is a rookie. This is a rookie on a historically terrible team and a terrible organization that they haven't been able to figure it out. John, they put the ball in this cat's hand. He ended up throwing the ball 468 times. Guys, if you go back and look at what that looks like, that is more than Josh Allen. That is more than Lamar Jackson. When you are asking a rookie to do these types of things, and then he's doing them at the highest level possible, it's incredible, man. So shout out to Jayden Daniels. Moving forward, guys, this is absolutely somebody that you can anchor your team on. In my personal opinion, I don't think this is a random rookie year sensation. I think next year it'll be very minimal sophomore slump. And I say that because of the options that he has around him in terms of Scary Terry, in terms of them adding even more people in the draft. You have Zach Ertz, who stepped up. You drafted Ben Sinnott, who you got in the second round last year. And now you have Austin Eckler, who was hurt. And you still have Brian Robinson Jr. Guys, this is a team that can do some really cool shit for years to come. And it's going to be anchored on Jayden Daniels. I really think Jayden Daniels' ceiling is Lamar. I think that that's truly his ceiling capability, especially when we're talking about them almost having identical numbers, right? That's pretty incredible. So for me, man, I think that this is amazing for Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, Jayden Daniels only had less than 200 yards passing twice in games that he finished.
That's insane.
And they were just below 200 yards passing. So very, very solid floor. And to have 800 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns.
Nuts.
I think that's his floor, to be perfectly honest. I really do. And that's why, if we're looking at next year, even though, let's look at it this way. You had Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield finish above Jayden Daniels. I'm taking Jayden Daniels above those two guys because of the ceiling. I said, the other guys had floor plays. Jayden Daniels is a ceiling play. I mean, this is a guy that can rush for 2 touchdowns in a game as well as throw for 2 or 3 at the same time. Not a lot of quarterbacks can say that, man. And we already talked about the ones who can do that. All right, let's keep moving on here. Let's go to 7, 8, and 9. We got number 7 is Sam Darnold, QB for the Minnesota Vikings. Bo Nix, number 8, a quarterback for the Denver Broncos, and Jalen Hurts at number 9, quarterback for the Eagles. Sam Darnold. All right. Absolutely incredible season out of Sam Darnold this year. 335 fantasy points. He was projected to be the QB 17. He was a new face in a new place. Well, guess what? He ended up being the QB 7 here, averaging 19.5 points per game. What's going on with Sammy?
I mean, there's so much to be said about a guy who 2 years ago was completely written off, right? And let me tell you, what did Geno Smith say? They might have written me off, but I didn't write back, right? And I love that. I love that because that's what Sam Darnold encompassed this year. Guys, he was terrible for the Jets, even worse for the Carolina Panthers. Gets an opportunity solely because J.J. McCarthy goes down. Let's call a spade. And he ran with it. And my God, did he run with it. Guys, 4,153 passing yards. He had 202 rushing yards. And he threw for 35 passing touchdowns. And he threw only for 12 interceptions. My Lord, here's what's interesting, guys. If you had Sam Darnold on your team, you were so happy. You picked him up off the waiver wire. You didn't draft him. And my God, were you happy. How do we look at Sam Darnold next year? That's what I want to focus on for him because he might not even be a Viking next year, guys. When the Vikings invest in J.J. McCarthy, right? They traded up to get him. And then you paid J.J., right? You paid him very handsomely. You're going to have to start thinking about Jordan Addison. You're going to have to start thinking about some of these younger guys on your defense, which made you a top 5 defense all year, right? With all of this kind of happening, and then you look at what Sam Darnold has done, he's going to demand a contract. As crazy as that sounds, this dude is ready to go on any of these teams that need a quarterback. They're looking at Sam Darnold like, holy shit, maybe he is our savior. I'm not trusting that, but that's what these guys are looking at. So when you think about fantasy football and where to hang your hat next year, John, if Sam Darnold is not throwing the ball to JJ, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson with Aaron Jones behind him and a very solid offensive line and a mastermind at calling plays with Kevin O'Connell, I don't know if I'm drafting Sam Darnold. What if you move Sam Darnold to the Giants? Yeah, he's thrown to Malik Neighbors, but we saw what happened there. Do we like that? Fuck no. What if he goes to the Raiders? Sure, you have Jacoby Myers and the number 1 tight end who's unbelievable. Is he going to be as good? Fuck no. So that's what's so interesting about Sam Darnold, guys, is you need to be thinking about where these quarterbacks ended up. Some of them are bluebirds. Some of them, we might miss the mark and say they're bluebirds for 2025. And Sam Darnold could be a top 10 quarterback again. But just be doing your research. Listen to us. We're going to be giving you guys this insight as we go through the year, man, because Sam Darnold's going to be a guy that's going to change up a team and is going to change the Vikings on how they operate if they move forward with J.J. McCarthy. So this guy is going to be really fun to see what happens in the offseason.
Yeah, we're recording this before the Week 18 games. I mean, we only want to talk about how we don't want the stats to be padded for Week 18 because everybody's fantasy leagues are over. So that's why we're doing the stats now. But Sam Darnold is crazy because they play the Lions for the number 1 seed in the NFL, in the NFC. And you're telling me this guy could be the number 1 seed in the NFC, potential Super Bowl aspirations here, and not be on the same team next year? That's a real fucking scenario. That is bananas to me.
Crazy.
So we're going to have to keep an eye on him for next year. Again, not a huge ceiling guy that you're going to go over and reach for in your drafts next year. But depending on if he's on the Vikings, I see him very much as a Jared Goff. Very, very similar to a Jared Goff, where it's a great team, averaging 20 points a game, going to be a beautiful floor for you, but not a big ceiling for you. All right, let's go on to the next guy here. Big rookie sensation, man. Did not expect this guy to be in the top 10 here, but I love it, man. Loved his play this year. Number 8, Bo Nix, quarterback for the Denver Broncos. 322 points for the year. Projected to be quarterback 27. Ended up as 18.4 points per game. Love Bo Nix this year, man.
John, Bo Nix was, I'll admit this. When we were doing the rookie review last year, I was torn between putting him on as a top 10 and not. And we actually left him off, okay? Because I didn't think based on him going into the situation with Denver, there wasn't a lot around him. We knew the running game would struggle, all of this stuff. We were wrong. So was everybody else. Bo Nix proved everyone wrong, and it is awesome, guys, to see this young talent come up This is so big. This is super big. So think about what he did. Bo Nix, 3,454 passing yards. He threw for 25 touchdowns. He ran for 4 touchdowns. He also had 383 rushing and only 12 picks. Guys, this is somebody, if Denver can get it right in terms of continuing to add pieces around him, get a running back that's worth a damn and figure this out. John, I'm actually comfortable saying you can draft Bo Nix as the top 10 passer. I really believe that. Top 12. What I'm getting at is he can be a QB1 for your fantasy team in 2025. And it's because his rushing capability gives him a solid floor, almost 400 yards. And then on top of it, Sean Payton handed over the offense to Bo Nix. And Bo Nix handled it beautifully. I mean, honestly, man, you could look at Bo Nix's stats and compare that to Jayden Daniels and the way he operated. Bo Nix could be Offensive Rookie of the Year. Like that's not out of the realm of possibility, especially if he takes them fighting through a strong AFC to a potential playoff. So what I'm getting at is, man, this was so fun to see Bo Nix, a guy that totally was off everybody's radar to a certain degree, to poke his head in and get a top 10 finish. Excellent job by Bo Nix.
Yeah, it really was a great job. I mean, he was a top 10 quarterback 6 times this year. I mean, just absolutely fantastic with that rushing floor. And I think that was low as well. I think they can unleash his rushing even a bit more. But man, hats off to Sean Payton. This team was in a total rebuild. I stayed away from the entire team. They started unloading really talented players like Jerry Jeudy and all of that. I was just like, no, they're in a rebuild, man. Not touching it this year. Bo Nix came through and surprised. So yeah, I am very much targeting Bo Nix next year in a super flex to have Bo Nix and team him up with one of those top guys, a Joe Burrow or a Lamar or a Josh Allen. Oh, chef's kiss, baby. All right, let's keep rolling here. Number 9. This one's a bit of a surprise here, Frankie, but let's break it down as to why it happened. Number 9, Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Eagles, 314, 10 points lower than Bo Nix this year. Projected as the QB3, ended as the 9, but averaged 21.3 points per game. Like we just said, Bo Nix was 18 points a game. Jalen Hurts averaged more. Talk to me about it.
I mean, Jalen Hurts, guys, is exactly who you thought you were going to get when you drafted him. He was probably QB3, QB4 off the board. Honestly, you shouldn't be upset that he finished QB9 because, John, he was a little bit banged up towards the end. We saw him go out with a concussion, all that stuff. But here's what was a little bit frustrating. If you owned Jalen Hurts, was a lot of the passing attack that was kind of lacking in comparison to years prior. When he only is, and I'm saying only, he didn't even throw for 3,000 yards, right? He had 2,900 yards. He only threw 18 touchdowns and he had 5 interceptions. But here's where Jalen Hurts makes it up. His rushing, he had 630 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. John, last year he had 15 or 16, I believe. This year we were like, hey, with Saquon Barkley coming in, I was nervous to take him. I said I wouldn't take him in the top 3 because I thought that he was going to, give way to Saquon. What we found, guys, that shit ain't changing. The tush push is there, and it's staying. This is not a Jason Kelsey thing anymore. This is what they do. This is an Eagles identity. When they get down to the 1 or 2 yard line, they're lining up and tush pushing it. They're not handing it off to Saquon. So what's interesting, man, is Jalen Hurts is who you thought he was. He ended up right around where you expected. But, guys, you would really be expecting Jalen Hurts to be where you had drafted him, knowing that he's averaging 21 points a game. Just a really good year overall.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting, very consistent too, looking year over year, because I hate when you see 14 rushing touchdowns by a quarterback, you're like, fuck, it's an anomaly. It's something you can't bank on and trust or anything like that. He had 14 rushing touchdowns this year. Last year he had 15. Year before that he had 13. Year before that he had 10. This is a thing that's going to happen. You can count on this of having double-digit rushing touchdowns for him. But you're right. What happened this year was the passing stats. And I just think that's purely having Saquon.
2,000-yard runner.
That's exact. They didn't have to rely on his arm as heavily as they've had to in the past. Their defense was much, much better this year. He didn't throw nearly as many picks. He had 15 picks last year. So that makes a big difference here. And I think Jalen Hurts, he had 1,000 yards less than he normally does passing, 100 less completions, and to still. He missed the last 2 games of the year. Had he played those, he'd still be in a top 10 between 5 and 10. So I think you can bank on it each and every year. He's got not only an alpha in A.J. Brown, but Devonta Smith, A tight end's always going to get involved. And man, if you got Saquon back there still, I still think he's going to be a great pick for next year. Yeah. All right, let's keep going here. Let's do 10, 11, and 12. Number 10, we've got Patrick Mahomes, baby, of the Chiefs. Very interesting. We'll get into that here in a second. Number 11, Brock Purdy, quarterback for the 49ers, and 12, Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals. All right, Patrick Mahomes, 313 fantasy points, 1 point below Jalen Hurts, 10 points below Bo Nix. Think about that. He was projected to be the QB4, ended up as the QB10, averaging 18.3 points per game. What happened with Patty this year?
Miserable. Misery is what happened if you drafted Patrick Mahomes. Guys, Johnny and I, we were in a league together, right? 14-man, super flex, super intense league, battle of the brands, bunch of podcasters all getting together and really fighting it out. We took Mahomes 101, and boy, did we fuck that up. Guys, what happened is just he had a down year. It didn't look like Patrick Mahomes. When you start looking at what he did, he didn't have throw for 4,000 yards. He had 3,928. He ended up having 307 yards rushing, 26 passing touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Guys, that is middle of the road. That is not a Patrick Mahomes stat line. That's not even fucking close to what he's normally doing. So for me, man, when he was supposed to be QB4, knowing that he had all of these pieces, right? He had Rashee Rice. He had that of Hollywood Brown. Travis Kelce's back and invigorated. And you have Pacheco. Everything changed when Rashee Rice went down. And Hollywood Brown's out now for season. And oh, by the way, your superstar running back is also gone. So now it really affected Mahomes' play. So for me, we know what he did this year. Number 10. Let's look to what do we do with him in 2025? John, I think Mahomes is going to be back to a top 5 QB. I really do. I think once we start seeing Rashee Rice get back and healthy, we already saw the immediate lift that Hollywood Brown provided, in addition to that of D-Hop being added mid-year, which was huge for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, really, outside of Kelce, his number one target was Noah Gray at some point. I mean, you're not going to be doing a lot from a fantasy perspective if that's your guy. No offense, Noah Gray. You're great, but, right, there's tiers to this shit. So for me, man, like, I really think, guys, 2025, Mahomes is going to be back, right? He led them, and the defense led them to a 14, 15-win team, right? They're number one in the AFC, so it's good to see. But 2025, I expect another top 5 performance as long as his teammates stay healthy.
I don't disagree with you. It's very situational. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that Josh Allen did it. Lamar did it by spreading the ball around, by not having an alpha on the team. But they had healthier receivers. It's healthy. Yeah, it's not as if they weren't throwing out random guys out here like Patrick Mahomes was.
And healthier running backs.
And healthier running backs, yeah, and healthier running games, absolutely. So yeah, I'm with you. I think we need to temper expectations. Patrick Mahomes is not. He's not going to be that quarterback that he is in the actual NFL on fantasy, on paper. It's just not going to happen. You've got guys that are putting up way more ridiculous numbers. Yes, he's going to be fine for you. Yes, he's got a solid floor, but this was definitely his worst year since 2020. And it didn't feel good in fantasy, yeah. I mean, fantasy-wise, numbers-wise, we're just going to have to temper our expectations with Patrick Mahomes. The ceiling got a much, much lower this year in my mind.
Yeah, it's capped.
Yeah. All right, number 11, Brock Purdy. This is not a guy I've never really been in the Brock Purdy fan club, let's say. And every time I talk shit about him, he plays great. And every time I come around a little bit and say, you know what, I think you could start Brock Purdy this week, he takes an absolute shit. So it doesn't make me like him more because he makes me wrong every time, no matter what I say about him. But all right, Brock Purdy, 49ers, 288 fantasy points. He was projected to be the QB8. He did not perform that way. He was the quarterback 11 here, 18.6 points per game. What's going on with Brock Purdy? How do you feel about him for next year? Is he going to be the quarterback next year?
John, all great points. I do think he's going to be the quarterback next year. I do think they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. Next year is his last year on his rookie contract, and that is one of the best contracts the 49ers could ever ask for when he is literally Mr. Irrelevant. That is as team-friendly as possible. So I think that he's going to be very good moving forward, guys. We saw Brock Purdy finish, as you mentioned, number 11, but that's without Christian McCaffrey all year. That's with Debo having one of the worst years ever. That is with Brandon Ayuk literally all the turmoil that happened in the offseason, then to finally get in and start playing and then to tear his ACL, right? So he was gone. All of this shit kind of happened. And then they lost Jordan Mason, so on and so forth. So for me, man, it's kind of situational to Patrick Mahomes. I think there were a lot of things that Brock Purdy did very well. I think there's a lot of things that Brock Purdy struggled immensely. And when teams were able to key in on him, man, and basically lock down George Kittle and take away kind of, the rush attack, he struggled. And that's just the reality of it. So with next year, with the players coming back, they're probably going to reconfigure some contracts. They're going to start figuring out how to really make Brock Purdy all warm and cozy again. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be QB1 once more, like he was this past year. I think you can wait in your 2025 draft to draft a guy like Brock Purdy super late and get good value out of him, right? But here's what's interesting. And here's a big key point, guys. When we talked about the first 10 quarterbacks, right? Everything kind of was okay. And what I mean by that is from their projection to what they did from an actual fantasy output, it was fairly okay. Here's where it starts becoming interesting when you look at how poorly across the NFL the quarterback landscape and how they performed actually was. When you start looking at what Brock Purdy's projection was at QB8, his projection was QB8, 369 fantasy points. Guys, he finished at QB11 with 288. But let's think about where QB8 was. That was Bo Nix. Bo Nix had 322 fantasy points in comparison to 370, 369. Guys, that's a monumental teardrop. That is huge. That's, at 10 points a game, we're talking that's 6 games, 5 games. And so for me, man, when we start going through some of these other quarterbacks, you're going to start seeing that outside of a couple of these guys, the quarterback landscape was terrible this year. And honestly, John, we kind of saw it from the product itself as a business standpoint from the NFL. It was kind of a weird year for the quarterback.
Yeah, and two of the quarterbacks that really struggled here that were in the top 10 that were just on the verge of not even being QB1s, Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy. I mean, their entire teams were riddled with injuries. I think Brock Purdy is more similar to a Sam Darnold or a Jared Goff, where you've got a very good team with a good quarterback, but not a quarterback that puts up gaudy numbers. Mm-hmm. But he's got to have that team around him. He's got to be surrounded by that team, got to be coached well. You lose, Sam Darnold loses JJ. Oh, Sam Darnold loses Aaron Jones. Sam Darnold's not a top 10 quarterback.
No.
Jared Goff as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't there, and they don't have that strong running game with Sonic and Nux. He's not the same quarterback. Brock Purdy lost
everything.
He lost CMC. He lost Brandon Ayuk. He lost, Debo's in and out and disappeared even when he was in. Jordan Mason. Yeah, they were down to their fifth string running backs. Brock Purdy's not that guy. He's not going to be able to carry the team on his shoulders. I don't think Goff's like that. I don't think Darnold's like that. So I think they're all in that similar category that as long as their teams are healthy, these guys can perform. If they don't, you're going to be under 20 points a game for sure. For sure. All right, let's keep going here. We've got Kyler Murray at the number 12 spot. So just inside a top 12 quarterback here. Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals, 283 points, almost identical to Brock Purdy. Projected to be the QB 10, was the QB 12. I don't think he necessarily really disappointed you this year, Frankie. I just think the ceiling you thought was there was not. 17.5 points per game.
John, he was miserable to me because it's exactly what you said. It was always 14 points, 20 points, 12 points, 22 points. There was no ceiling play at all for Kyler. And we even were talking about he was a part of a top 5 stack.
Yeah.
John, before the season, it was Marvin Kyler.
Yep.
And so we're like, holy shit, you got James Conner, you got Trey McBride, you got, Marv coming in, you got Michael Wilson, you got the team around you in a division that's not that great, right? It's okay. It's middle of the road, but it ain't the AFC North, but it ain't the NFC South, right? It's right in that middle tier. And so I'm thinking, man, Kyler Murray's upside heading into this year was top 5, top 6 for sure.
Yeah.
And with him performing double that, at 12, it was just like a damn it, right? Like you drafted him to be like that QB 10 mark or whatever, and it's just like you got no value. So that's why I said it was annoying to be a Kyler Murray owner this year.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we did have Kyler and Marv as a top 5 stack. And who knew that it was going to be Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton instead?
Right.
Are you ever going to bet on that? If you're betting between those two stacks, would you ever have taken Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton over Kyler and Marv? No way.
Never.
No way. Yeah, they've got some shit to figure out here. Kyler Murray's he's a scary quarterback to draft. You get so tempted because there is a rushing floor, because he is the team. He literally puts the team on his tiny little shoulders. Whether or not James Conner's in or not, he's throwing to Marv, he's throwing to Trey McBride. They've got options as well. So it's super frustrating not to get those ceilings out of him. But yeah, we're gonna have to see what we're gonna do with him next year, man. He's gonna be one of those guys that I think we're gonna be arguing about nonstop. All right, let's keep moving on here. Let's go to 13, 14, and 15. We've got Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, and Aaron Rodgers. Oh, this will be an interesting conversation. Number 13, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers, 276 points, very similar to Kyler. He was projected to be the QB 9, ended up as the QB 13, averaging 17.3 points a game. You know, it felt, Frankie, to me that Jordan Love was better than that this year. Are the stats kind of skewed because he did miss a handful of games in the middle of the season there?
Yeah, John, they are. And guys, here's some of his stats, right? He threw for 3,320 yards. He had 83 rushing yards. He had 25 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and he only threw for 11 picks. Now, when you compare his stats to Kyler Murray, you're like, wait, you're dogging Kyler Murray when he threw for 300 more passing yards, had 500 more rushing yards, right? But he didn't hit the mark when passing touchdowns or even really rushing touchdowns for Kyler. Kyler had 17 passing, 5 rushing. Again, Jordan Love, 25 passing, 1 rushing. So for me, man, what this comes down to is I think the hype from him being so well in his playoff run last year leading into this year's draft, it was like, holy shit, the ceiling on this guy is through the roof. And especially when you have all of the weapons that they had, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I actually think Jordan Love, man, it was almost like he did what he was doing. He did what he was supposed to do. And it's kind of like if you drafted him to be that ceiling play, yeah, you might be frustrated, but it's a little bit different because for me, there was a higher expectation for Kyler, right, versus that of a Jordan Love to where, yeah, man, he was his first year starting last year, right? We're starting to see this very young receiving core around him collectively. They brought in Josh Jacobs to really rely on that rushing attack, and it worked. And so the team was phenomenal, but, you know, Jordan Love's fantasy stats kind of were just meh. But it was interesting because I still looked at Jordan Love, and I think you did too, as somebody who was like, yeah, he was solid. He was solid. But it's interesting because we're not having that same sentiment for Kyler because the ceiling expectation was so much higher for Kyler.
I would like to see, I think in order to get Jordan Love to take the next step to level up, I think he does need an alpha receiver. I think they have a very good receiving core. Josh Jacobs was an absolute goddamn beast, new face and new place. Awesome. And that took so much pressure off of Jordan Love this year. I really believe that. He did miss a few games, so I think he would have ended up in the top 10 had he played. But yeah, that's what I think to get him to the next level would be an alpha. Give him an A.J. Brown, give him the J.J., give him a
T.
guy
Higgins.
like that. Put a T. Higgins on that team. That would be very, very interesting, man. Yeah, I can see them making a move in the offseason, trying to find somebody like that for him, because that will just, Jayden Reed is an excellent receiver, and I think his future in the NFL is super bright. He's not an alpha. He's not a one.
He's a Deebo Samuel-like.
Absolutely. You make him a secondary, he's a Devonta Smith. He's, one of those guys. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, which Amon-Ra plays all over the field. He plays in the slot. He's everywhere. Similar to that. If you can give
Amon-Ra's
him...
dominant, though.
Amon-Ra's that. He's a different thing. I'm just saying they're built very similarly and play very similarly. Yeah, Amon-Ra, he's a sun god, man. Come on.
He's amazing.
But give him an alpha, and I think he becomes one as well. All right, let's keep going here. At number 14, we got Justin Herbert. 260 fantasy points. He was projected to be the QB 20. He overperformed that as the QB 14, averaging 16.3 points per game. Justin Herbert's very interesting, man. This is kind of a tale of two cities, tale of two quarterbacks here with Justin Herbert. He was projected as the QB 20 because I think they knew they were just going to run the tits off the ball. And you know what? They started the season doing that. Harbaugh came in. He's installing his guys, his plan.
Awesome.
We're going to take football back to 1997, and we're just going to run the ball constantly. And that's exactly what he did. And then things started shifting. And all of a sudden, we went, oh, shit, Justin Herbert's legit. What went on here, man? Talk about the how everything went down with Justin Herbert this year.
Guys, Justin Herbert for the first few weeks was barely startable. Actually, John, I think we even mentioned it. He was droppable because of that, guys.
Yep.
JK, he was the team. And then when JK got hurt, we kept talking about it. This team is a run-first team. It opens up everything else. When that happened, they had to rely on Herbert. And my Lord, was he efficient as hell. Guys, here's how good Justin Herbert was. 3,500 passing yards on a run-first team, okay? He had still 264 rushing yards, which again is an additional 26 points in fantasy football, guys. And then he had 21 passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions. John, if you talk about giving somebody an alpha, right? We got McConkey. We saw what Laddie did. Laddie was sensational, especially in the last 7 weeks of the year, right? But it takes these rookie receivers sometimes outside of Malik Neighbors, outside of the super special, crazy, out-of-the-box elite athletes like those guys. Some of these other cats, it takes a little bit of time, like Garrett Wilson, like Amon-Ra, like Laddie, right? And so now if you're telling me that you could end up getting a serious-ass top-tier receiver to pair with Laddie and Quentin Johnson, which, by the way, welcome back, way to come back from the dead, right? Because there was a lot of time that, fuck, man, we weren't sure if he was going to be on the team anymore because he couldn't catch the ball. And now, dude, I'm seeing Justin Herbert. I think his ceiling, John, is top 10 next year. If they can get him a true receiver one to pair with Laddie, I think that this is a skyrocket type of team.
I do too. I think he's one of those guys that is going to be underdrafted next year.
Yes.
He was underdrafted this year, but it was smart to do so. He did not pull that off until midway through the season when they started opening him up. And Harbaugh, I mean, to see how much Harbaugh loves him, Harbaugh calling him a beast, building him up, boosting him up. You give him a guy, maybe a T. Higgins. Give him another option on the outside. Josh Palmer is not that guy. No. He's not that guy. And Quentin Johnston is only kind of that guy because of Justin Herbert.
Yes.
Give him an alpha with Laddie running all over the goddamn field and with Q on the outside there too. They're going to keep that running game strong. Yeah, man. I mean, I really think Herbert could be one of those surprise quarterbacks next year.
And
no
John,
question.
It goes just like even talking about the downplay of the quarterback this year, right? You mentioned it. QB 20 projection at 323 points. He finished as the QB 14 at 260 points. Guys, this is what we're talking about. Outside of those top few, you're going to start hearing some crazy differences in the projection to where they actually honestly finished. And that caused a lot of craziness from your quarterback position in fantasy this year.
Yeah, one of the other stats that really jumps out to me with Justin Herbert too, this is the most sacks he's ever taken by far, 40 sacks. He only had 3 interceptions, but he had 40 sacks. I mean, that's going to wear on you. The year before that was 29. So he had 11 more sacks this year than he had last year. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, let's move forward here. Number 15, we've got Aaron Rodgers. Really interesting here. To tell me Aaron Rodgers only had 10 points less than Justin Herbert doesn't sound right to me, right?
No.
Or 25 points less than Jordan Love and Kyler Murray. It doesn't sound right to me. He was projected to be the quarterback 18, came in as the quarterback 15, averaging 15.1 points per game. That's pretty low to be ranking in the top 15 here. Talk to me about Aaron Rodgers.
Guys, Aaron Rodgers was tough this year. I mean, yeah, he kind of finished right around his projection, even a little bit better. This was someone that I thought had QB1 potential written all over him. Guys, there was so much hype coming in. You got Devontae Adams midseason. You end up having Garrett Wilson starting off, Tyler Conklin, Alan Lazard, you name it.
Breece Hall.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it was just insane. And then to see the drop-off, to actually see the drop-off occur, guys, for me, and I'm going to be very crystal clear when I say this, Aaron Rodgers is off my board for 2025. I think that there is so much younger talent coming up. Bo Nix, Jayden Daniels, right? Even Drake Maye, who performed very well towards the end. I might even stack rank him over Aaron Rodgers next year. So guys, for me, we don't even know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Jet. We don't know if Devontae Adams is going to be a Jet. We don't know if Garrett Wilson is going to be on the Jets because from what we're hearing, there's a lot of rumors that the Chiefs are trying to draft or trade for him, right? So there's a lot of shit going on with this Jets team. So for me, man, yeah, Aaron Rodgers, tip of the cap. You performed better than your projection, I guess, way less in points, but you're off my board in 2025.
I think the only reason it technically he was above his projections because nobody wanted to draft him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they downplayed him. They didn't know He had an Achilles injury, and you know what? They should have downplayed him. He's not the same guy. He absolutely is not the same guy. He doesn't move in the pocket. He doesn't move outside of the pocket like he used to. And man, when you're telling me you got Garrett Wilson and you've got Devontae Adams, you've got the talent that he was surrounded with.
Crazy talent.
And you're telling me he can't move into a top 12 quarterback? That blows my mind, man. I'm very scared of him next year. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of drama and bullshit in the offseason. I don't know that this team's going to want to put up with that if there's another option that they can look at making here. But yeah, really scary. If you drafted him this year, it had to be a roller coaster ride. So sorry, it made you sick there. All right, let's look at 16, 17, and 18 here. Interesting group of guys here. Geno Smith with the Seahawks, Matt Stafford with the Rams, and Caleb Williams with the Bears. Geno Smith, all right, kind of a tale of two quarterbacks as well.
Yeah.
He really kind of took off and exploded early in the season and then really went downhill quite a bit. Geno Smith, 238 points on the year. Again, 10 points behind Aaron Rodgers. Just saying that alone makes you kind of want to puke.
Yeah.
I don't want to start that guy. Hey, this quarterback's going to end up 10 points less than Aaron Rodgers did this year. You want him on your team? No.
Sure don't.
No, I sure don't, man. He was projected to be the projected to be the QB 12. Ended up at 16, averaging 15.9 points per game. What'd you think about Geno?
I think he did okay. I think last year we saw Geno Smith's ceiling, John. You mentioned that last year. I vividly remember you saying that. And this year we're seeing the real Geno Smith, which is he's a competent quarterback. Guys, he's a starting NFL caliber quarterback. He's just terrible for fantasy. Yeah, he had over 4,000 yards passing this year. But to your point, tale of two QBs with him. He had 17 passing touchdowns, which isn't a lot. And he threw for 15 interceptions, which is a lot. In addition, right, they relied heavily on Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, which you think would open them up even more. Candidly speaking, man, Geno Smith just missed DK on quite a few throws. And so for me, man, yeah, it was miserable if you had him. You were floating in purgatory, right? But I think that this is where you can expect Geno Smith. And I think he's a lot of value in a 2-quarterback league for next year, right? Just because of the weapons he has around him. But again, he's going to be middle of the pack, and that's where you need to level set your own expectation.
Yeah, in a super flex, great QB2. I think it's a very safe value QB2. Not a guy I want to anchor my team on in a 1-quarterback league.
Right.
And a couple of those stats you just said are the reasons why. 17 touchdowns, but 15 picks and 48 sacks.
48 sacks. Good
48
call.
sacks, man. So it was just really sloppy football. He just kind of reminded me this year of maybe a Jameis Winston or a Joe Flacco, where just kind of a wing and a prayer and hoping guys come down with it. And that's not, you're getting negative points for sacks. You're getting negative points for picks. So, I mean, that destroyed his stat line and fantasy points. All right, let's talk a little bit about Matthew Stafford, man. You want to talk about a guy that I think his watch has ended, Frankie. I don't see a ceiling at all any longer for Matthew Stafford. No. Am I just overreacting here? Matthew Stafford, 17th quarterback on the year, 232 points, 5 points behind Geno Smith, projected to be QB 23. I just think people were scared of him. Ended up at QB 17, 13.9 points per game for your quarterback. That's like an RB2, and that's your quarterback. What's going on? What do we do?
John, I think you're right. I think we're seeing the sunset of Matt Stafford. And I love Stafford. He's been a guy that I think he's a borderline Hall of Famer due to that Super Bowl win and things like that. I think he's right on the cusp of that. But for me, man, when we talk about fantasy football, I think his watch is ending. And I say that because what better situation could you ask to be in? You had Kyron Williams. You had Cooper Kupp. You had Puka Nacua. You finally got Tyler Higbee back. You had Colby Parkinson, who was very good. And you still performed shitty. And you're lucky. He's so lucky. The defense was started doing something towards the end of the year to really make a run and potentially be, representing them as the division leader for the playoffs. But for me, man, when it comes to fantasy, Matt Stafford, unfortunately, is a guy that I'm not willing to draft next year either. I would actually go with Geno Smith over him. I would even go with our next guy that we're going to talk about, Caleb Williams, man, because I think Caleb Williams at least has an arrow pointing up. It was a tough rookie year. We saw that with Caleb, right? Projection was QB 19, man. and he ended up QB 18. Good. Point differential, really bad. He had 217 points. His projection was 326. But again, he's figuring it out. He was in a terrible spot with the coaching and the team atmosphere and things of that nature. So for me, I would lean Caleb Williams over Stafford, but both of these guys, man, it was a tough year. It was a tough year for both.
Yeah, I'm with you on Stafford, man. I mean, he was a top 10 quarterback only 3 times this year.
Yeah.
That's not the Matthew Stafford we know and love. And for whatever reason, it destroyed Puka Nacua at the end of the season. Or, I'm sorry, not Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp.
Disappeared completely at the end of the year, man. Screwed us in our battle of the Brit. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Matthew Stafford may be one of those guys off my board for next year as well. I'm with you on that one, man. All right, Caleb Williams. So this is going to be a guy. We did a video, post it right here. Rookie Caleb Williams, number 1 overall draft pick, going to the Bears. They drafted a receiver in Roma Dunze as well. Just completely stacked offensive roster. You could not have had more hype on a team in the offseason coming into this year as the Chicago Bears. In my mind, very, very disappointing. Caleb Williams, 217 fantasy points, projected to be the QB 19. I think that was just being fair as a rookie. Came in as the QB 18, but not a guy you felt good about starting. And most, if not all weeks, you really couldn't start him. Averaging 15.6 points per game. Caleb Williams, man, what are we doing?
Caleb Williams.
I mean,
John, hey, man, I think he's going to be right there, right around that same thing for next year. I think he could improve a little bit. Maybe we see him move into top 14, top 15 world. But right now, man, I mean, they might not have Keenan Allen. They might not have Keenan Allen next year, right? He might be gone. So you still have DJ Moore. You still have Roma Dunze, who we saw some really nice play from. But outside of that, I mean, it was predominantly Caleb Williams who struggled. And that's what gives me, when you see Bo Nix doing incredible things with half the talent around him. Yeah. When you see Jayden Daniels, who was drafted 2 overall, sure, he had Scary Terry, but I'm taking Keenan Allen, I'm taking DJ Moore, I'm taking DeAndre Swift and Roma Dunze over anything that they had, right? And they being the Commanders, even over Scary Terry. So for me, man, I think that we're going to see Caleb Williams finish right around that mark.
All right, last thing I'm going to say about Caleb Williams really quickly. We just freaked out about 40 and 48 sacks. Unless they bolster this offensive line and use that money they're going to lose with Keenan Allen and a few other guys, unless they're signing offensive linemen or draft offensive linemen, I'm not touching Caleb Williams. He was sacked 67 times this year.
That's crazy.
67 times. Otherwise, his play was decent. His numbers were decent and efficiency weren't bad. Only 6 picks with 19 touchdowns. 3,400 yards passing, 61.9% completion percentage. Wasn't bad, but the 67 sacks, you're just not putting this guy in a position to succeed.
Nope.
Bottom line. All right, let's go on to the next couple of guys here. We've got number 19, 20, and 21. All of these guys absolutely killed you. These were guys you drafted to be your QB1 in single quarterback leagues, and all 3 of these guys destroyed you. Probably the worst of the bunch as far as where they were projected and where they ended up. CJ Stroud at number 19. Tua Tagovailoa at 20. Kirk Cousins at 21. All right, geez, this should be a whole nother episode by itself just to talk about these 3 guys.
No kidding.
Frankie, CJ Stroud, 209 fantasy points. He was projected to be the QB5. Way overdrafted. Ended as the QB 19, not even a QB1. 14.2 points per game. What the hell happened with CJ Stroud this year, man?
John, he was flustered. It didn't look like the same CJ Stroud. I fell into that trap, guys. I was all about CJ Stroud. I thought there was no way that with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, you add Joe Mixon, right? All of this shit, that he was not going to perform to top 5, let alone top 10. Guys, he doubled that. He's almost at 20. And John, this was so miserable to have. Sure, he had still 3,600, almost 3,700 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, but he still threw for 12 picks. And the disparity between him throwing for, right, the 19 versus the 12 interceptions, the 19 touchdowns versus the 12 interceptions, wasn't enough to overcome his lack of volume in terms of the passing yardage. So for me, man, this was miserable. This was, actually, I'm going to say it, this was the worst quarterback to have on your team this year based on where you drafted him, the value and the stock that you had to get him, and where he actually ended up. If you had him, more than likely you did not make a Super Bowl. And I think I'll put money on that. That's how bad this was.
Yeah, I mean, he just had a really bad year after just blowing the world up last year. I mean, he had more attempts and more completions this year than he did last year. That's what's
Crazy.
really weird about it. But 19 versus 23 touchdowns, so very similar there. 3,600 yards versus 4,100 yards, very similar there. But it was the rest of the team as well. I mean, he had 12 picks versus 5, 52 sacks versus 38 sacks. So
52 sacks.
Yeah, just a very, very different year. Like you said, flustered. To go from 38 sacks to 52 sacks, that's going to fluster any quarterback. Really disappointing, man. I mean, I thought he was overdrafted this year anyway, but I didn't think it was by this much. I just thought he was going to come back. He had an incredible rookie year. Maybe he's going to come back down to life a tad. But yeah, and I thought Joe Mixon would bring him down just a little bit because they're going to have so much stronger of a running game. They're not going to need to throw the ball as much as they did. They did. They threw the ball even more, and his stats were even less. So very, very strange year. Be interesting to see what they do with him. I mean, where do you put him averaging 14.2 points per game? I mean, where do you look at him and what range potentially for next year? Are you taking Justin Herbert over CJ Stroud next year?
That's a really good question.
Single quarterback league.
No.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because I think that the upside of CJ Stroud is still a little higher. Now, that is speaking as of now. If Justin Herbert gets a true receiver one, I'm going Justin Herbert. But if all things are status quo, everything is consistent from this year, we're heading into next year, same players, etc. Or maybe, no Tank Dell, obviously, but let's just say Stephon Diggs comes back. I am leaning CJ Stroud just because I think there's a higher ceiling. But if I go CJ Stroud or you guys go CJ Stroud, you damn near better be picking up another quarterback because you want a high possible ceiling play quarterback then, like what could have been an A-Rich, right? Just throwing out an example, or a Bo Nix this year, or somebody along those lines, Jayden Daniels, right? You might have to go QB or something crazy. But yeah, man, like it's tight, but I would probably still lean Stroud unless Justin Herbert gets a receiver one.
I think it's going to be really interesting as well when you're looking at that draft and you're going to see Bo Nix, you're going to see Kyler Murray, and you're going to see CJ Stroud all in a row right there. And that's going to be a hell of a would you rather for next year, Frankie, of what you're going to do in that situation. Because the ceiling and the hope and the tantalizing, what could this be, is there. It's all
for
there.
All three.
But they've also been very disappointing as well. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of both, man. It's going to be interesting. All right, keep going here. Let's get weird. Tua Tagovailoa, 204 points, right there with Stroud. Start of the year projection was QB 15, 17.1 points per game. Now, his points per game was higher. Tua did miss some games, obviously, with devastating injuries, but that's going to come into play next year as well with the head injuries going into next year. He takes another concussion, which we see people do all the time. He may never play again. He almost didn't come back and play again this time. So talk to me about Tua just a tad, man.
Guys, I think it's the same boat as CJ Stroud. Now, with that being said, I think Tua is a more stable option as long as he doesn't get hurt. I think that over CJ Stroud, I think that just with the team around him, Tua, in my opinion, he's performing consistently better than what CJ Stroud was. Now, if you are going to wait to draft Tua, which I might actually do next year, right? If he ends up falling to QB 18, 16, something like that, and I have an opportunity to pick him up late, same exact thing of what I said with CJ Stroud. You got to pick up another quarterback. What we've seen is Tua goes out, the entire team landscape sucks. And I'm not saying you're picking up the backup to Dolphins. That is not what I'm saying. That is not a good option. You need to literally pick up a Russell Wilson, a Drake Maye, a CJ Stroud, somebody along those lines as well to pair with that of Tua just in case.
Yeah, I mean, Tua missed 5 games. So, yeah, he ended up at the quarterback 20. He would have been top 13. He would have been a quarterback 1 with 17 points per game. CJ Stroud was 14 points per game, and he finished right behind him here. So it is injury, but I think that's going to be the norm. I think you have to take that into consideration. So like you said, yes, you can take him as your QB1, but you have to have a viable plan. So by taking him, you're taking another quarterback early where you could be getting talent at running back or receiver and depth there instead. So that's something to consider. All right, well, talk to us about Kirk Cousins here, man. I mean, this is going to be a weird one. 192 points. Kirk Cousins came in as the quarterback 21, projected to be the quarterback 21. And I think that was because of the Achilles, all of that stuff, new team, all of that kind of shit. Ended up with 13.7 points per game, though. Kirk Cousins, first of all, it hurt. It absolutely hurt you this year. No question. He started off really well and then just completely nosedived to where they're cutting him here to save $10 million. We don't know where he's going to be next year. Is he going to be on a team? Is he going to be a viable fantasy asset? What do you think?
John, I do. I think he could actually do the Cleveland Browns. I think that that's a legitimate possibility. I think you bring him in for dirt cheap. And I think that that doesn't provide as much fantasy value as what we think, guys. Is it really that bad? Is the Browns situation a better situation from a fantasy perspective for a quarterback than the Falcons? I would say no.
No.
I would absolutely say no. You have Drake London. You have the emergence of a true receiver 2 in Darnell Mooney. And you have a true receiver 3 with Ray McCloud. Welcome, Ray McCloud, to fantasy relevance. And then in addition to that, we could go back and forth all day in Kyle Pitts. Fair. I got it. Cool. But the running backs with Bijan Robinson out of the backfield from a receiving perspective was awesome. And so then you look at the Browns, man, you got Jerry Jeudy, you got Njoku, and that's pretty much where it stops and ends. Yeah, maybe Cedric Tillman, fine. Maybe we draft a receiver, fine. But none of that gets me super excited, right? So for me, guys, when looking at Kirk Cousins, it is 100% going to be dependent where he lands. And it is 100% going to be the case that I am not drafting Kirk Cousins next year at all. He's another guy off my board. There's other options that are around that I could end up being way happier with even a safer floor and a higher ceiling than that of Kirk.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. He's just one of those guys where it's out with the old, in with the new.
Yep.
And I'm taking some of these younger guys over guys like Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it works. That's how rankings work here, guys.
Out with the old calf and in with the young bull.
The young bull. That's right. Yeah. Good Step Brothers quote there, man.
Yeah.
All right, let's touch base with these last three guys here. 22, 23, and 24. We've got Derek Carr, Drake Maye of the Patriots, and Anthony Richardson, A-Rich of the Colts. All right, we don't need to get into a ton of discussion with Derek Carr. I think we all know who he is. He's basically QB 22, no matter what team he's on and who's around him. Don't see a huge ceiling for him. Just see him being kind of a backup quarterback, a higher floor, low ceiling QB2 you could play in your super flex, but that's really about it. Drafted as a QB 28, ended as a QB 22, did not finish the year either. 15.6 points per game. He's a jag in my mind. He's just a guy, but a solid floor piece. All right, Drake Maye, very interesting. Rookie QB for the New England Patriots, 177 points. Projection at the start of the year, QB 34, not draftable. Ended up with 14.4 points per game. Not a guy you wanted to play, not a guy that's surrounded by a lot of talent, but next year could be interesting. Am I right?
Totally right. John, guys, I'm not looking at Drake Maye for a single quarterback league. No, I'm not doing it. There's other options, but in a super flex league, I'm salivating over Drake Maye. I think that the Patriots are going to get a top tier receiver in the offseason to help. They had terrible receiving options across the board. Yeah. The running backs were terrible. Ramondre and Antonio Gibson. I mean, literally, that offense was terrible. The only shining light was actually Drake Maye, which is a phenomenal sign for the Patriots as a whole, because now you actually have your guy. I truly believe the Patriots found their guy.
I do too.
With Drake Maye. You know what I mean? So when we talk about a fantasy output, man, I think that he could be very special for a 2-quarterback league, especially if the Patriots go out and get some receiving help as well.
Yeah, agreed, man. Last guy, top 24, rounding us out here, Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts, 177 fantasy points, projected to start the year at QB 22, ended at 24. Now, we say projected at 22, but I just want to call this out. All of the fantasy analysts and experts, Anthony Richardson was a top 5 quarterback for that. They were drafting him with the rushing floor, with the hopes he's going to take a season 2, second season bump and step up. He did not, man. This was one of the weirdest quarterbacks in the absolute world. The fact that he was still a QB2, the fact that he is still in the top 24 really kind of blows my mind. He did have a couple of decent games to end the year, and I think what that's going to do is give all the fantasy experts again going, no, you don't understand. He's going to run again. Fuck you. He threw like 9 passes most of the games he played. I mean, that's just not a guy I'm putting on here. I drafted him in a super flex to get a little piece of what all the experts were saying. They were all wrong, man. This is one of the biggest guys that left egg on your face as a fantasy, football analyst. And what do you think? What are you going to do with him next year? And how did you feel about him this year?
John, he was off my board this year. We talked about it. It did not matter. I was not drafting him. Guys, I watched him so much in college, right? And I couldn't even believe that the Colts drafted him at 4. And it was solely because he was a physical specimen, right? What we saw was, guys, this sums it up. This sums up Anthony Richardson. You ready? He had 1,800 passing yards. He had 499 rushing yards. He had 8 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 8 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. But here's the caveat. He had 264 passing attempts. To put it in perspective, Drake Maye played half the year, and Drake Maye had 337. They are not throwing the ball. They're not throwing the ball when Anthony Richardson is in. So, guys, that caps the ceiling immediately. Then on top of it, if he's not rushing, you get nothing. So there depletes the floor. It's not like the floor is because of his rushing. That's all he has. And so for me, man, knowing that his re-injury risk is super high, knowing he's already been banged up, knowing he's been benched for Joe Flacco, knowing his completion percentage is dog shit, knowing that he threw less passing attempts than Drake Maye, it just goes back to say, A-Rich is off my board moving in 2025.
And what I try to do is say, all right, what would a team add in the offseason to make me want this guy more, to make me feel better about him and want him on my team? What are you going to put on this Colts team to make him specifically better?
Nothing.
There's
nothing
You've got Michael Pittman and Josh Downs playing very well.
Incredible.
Alec Pierce came out of nowhere with a deep threat. JT came on like a bat out of hell at the end of the season. When he's healthy, he's incredible. What are you going to add other than a Brock Bowers caliber tight end, which isn't going to help him anyway because he's only throwing the ball goddamn 12 times a game or whatever.
Yeah. And it's not like their defense was dog shit, right? It's not like that the positive game script, no, their defense was very good. Yeah, I know the last game with the Giants, whatever. We can argue about that, whatever. But for the rest of the season, they were pretty damn good. And so to your point, John, what could you do to make Anthony Richardson better?
Yeah.
In my eyes, I don't think there's a cure. I think that this is who he is and how he's always been. And he's athletic and he does incredible shit, but he's injury prone and he can't make the throws. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And it's the inexperience too. I mean, we talked about it. His entire college and pro it's been a season and a half, 2 seasons and a half, something like that. We compared that with Jayden Daniels, who played 5 seasons in college.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's just a difference of experience. And we saw that play out. And I mean, it's not enough for me to say, oh no, he's going to figure it out next year. I need to see it before I even consider him, man. Yeah. All right, guys, that is the top 24 quarterbacks in the 2024 season. Oh, man, that's when you look back and talk about these guys and I see some of my teams and I'm going, yeah, no wonder I fucking lost. I drafted A-Rich as my super flex, or I put way too much into Kirk Cousins this year. And I mean, you can see, or Matt Stafford, it's
CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud, yeah, you drafted CJ Stroud and 4th round, 3rd, 4th round, that absolutely destroyed you. So,
or super flex, it was 2nd.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good to look back and it's good to see, where did we think these guys were going to be in the beginning of the year? What did everybody say they were? What are they actually? And then how are we going to feel about them next year? What could change to make these guys better fantasy options for next year? So hopefully this was some good information for you guys, or at least gave you an opportunity to go for a walk or work out and review the top 24 quarterbacks and get our takes on them. So let us know yourself. Let us know your thoughts. Please send us comments. Like, subscribe, share everywhere on social media. But send us comments of what quarterbacks did you have? How did they affect your team? What are you going to do about them next year? Who are you high on for next year? And we'll see if we agree or disagree with you guys. Frankie, what else do we have coming up here, man?
Guys, tune in. We're going to be dropping our review, our year in review for running backs, top 24. We're also going to dive into receivers, top 24, and then we're going to hit you with those tight ends and really start formulating ideas and strategies and things to think of while we're heading into this offseason, guys. So this is really exciting shit. Stay tuned. That will be dropping next week.
A couple of these episodes coming out, so keep it going with us, guys. All right, Frankie, we'll see you next time, and we'll start talking about running backs. How's that sound? May the fantasy gods smile upon you. Bye.